The desperate plea. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was in chaos. Delegates from a dozen species shouted over one another, their holographic forms flickering erratically as their ships transmitted from distant systems. The air was thick with panic and despair. "The Krillax have breached our outer defenses," shouted the Zenthari ambassador, her scaled face pale with fear. "If we don't act now, they'll consume our homeworlds within weeks." "We have already sent our fleets, and they were obliterated," retorted the Grivaxen representative, his clawed hands clenching. "What more can we do? They are unstoppable." From the far end of the chamber, the elder Lorithian voice stood, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "We must face the truth. Our unity is meaningless against this enemy. Our strategies have failed. The Krillax do not negotiate, do not retreat. They devour." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant hum of the council station's shields. The delegates exchanged hopeless glances, their desperation mirrored in every face. Suddenly, a crackling sound interrupted the quiet. A new transmission forced its way onto the central display. The flickering image of a Venthri ambassador appeared, his once proud features now gaunt and bloodied. He coughed violently, struggling to speak. "Council, hear me," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "My world, my people, gone. The Krillax, they are here." His trembling hands gripped the edge of his console, his wide, insect-like eyes filled with terror. "Ambassador Tarek, hold on," the Lorithian elder urged, leaning forward. "What do you mean they are there? How did they breach your defenses so quickly?" Tarek shook his head weakly. "They adapt. They knew our plans before we acted. We cannot win. Not alone." He coughed again, blood staining his pale lips. "There is only one chance. Call the humans." The room erupted into stunned murmurs. "Humans?" The Grivaxen representative barked. "Are you suggesting we entrust our survival to those primitive, reckless creatures?" Tarek's voice grew weaker, but his words were firm. "You do not understand them. They are not what you think. I have seen what they can do. If anyone can stop the Krillax, it is them." With that, the transmission cut out, leaving only a blank screen. The delegates sat in shocked silence, processing the dying Venthri's plea. The Zenthari ambassador finally broke the silence. "Humans, they are a backward species, isolated and stubborn. They lack the sophistication needed to fight an enemy like this. And yet," the Lorithian elder said, his voice thoughtful, "no Krillax force has ever dared to approach their system. Have you ever wondered why?" The Grivaxen representative sneered. "Superstition, nothing more. The Krillax have no need for that barren corner of the galaxy." The elder shook his head. "Perhaps, or perhaps the humans are more formidable than we have given them credit for." He paused, looking around the chamber. "We have tried everything else. What choice do we have?" The delegates exchanged uncertain glances. The Zenthari ambassador finally nodded, her voice reluctant. "Very well. We will send the call." Moments later, a priority transmission was sent to the Sol system, Earth's home. The council watched nervously as the message disappeared into the vastness of space. For hours they waited, each second stretching into an eternity. Some murmured doubts, while others paced the chamber, unable to sit still. Then, without warning, the main display lit up. The holographic image of a human appeared, a woman with piercing eyes and a calm, commanding presence. She wore a sleek uniform, her dark hair tied back tightly. "This is Commander Elena Graves of Earth," she said, her voice steady. "We've received your message." The chamber fell silent, every delegate holding their breath. Graves leaned forward slightly, her gaze unyielding. "Tell us everything. And prepare yourselves. We're coming." Her words sent a shiver through the room. For the first time in days, a glimmer of hope sparked in the hearts of the council. Humanity had answered the call. The arrival of the human fleet. The council chamber was abuzz with anticipation and unease. For centuries, humanity had been dismissed as a minor player in the galactic theater, an oddity confined to its own solar system. Yet now, they were the galaxy's last hope. The alien delegates crowded near the central display as the first signals from Earth's fleet began to appear. Long-range scans revealed an armada emerging from hyperspace, their formation tight and disciplined. The ships were unlike anything the council had ever seen. "They're black," whispered the Zenthari ambassador, her golden eyes narrowing. The holographic projection magnified the vessels. Sleek and angular, the ships seemed to absorb the surrounding light, their surfaces shimmering with strange patterns. Each one was adorned with a symbol, a blue and white sphere encircled by laurel branches. That's their emblem, murmured the Lorithian elder, his voice tinged with awe. The United Nations of Earth. Before anyone could respond, a communication link opened. Commander Elena Graves reappeared on the central display. She stood tall, her calm demeanor radiating authority. Behind her, the bustling bridge of her flagship hummed with activity. "This is Commander Graves," she announced. "Earth's fleet has arrived. We are assuming control of the war effort." The Grivaxan representative bristled. "Assuming control? You cannot simply." Graves raised a hand, silencing him. "We didn't come all this way to debate. If you want to survive, you'll follow our lead. If not, you're welcome to handle the Krillax yourselves." Her tone was icy, her confidence unshakable. The Zenthari ambassador, usually quick to argue, remained silent. The devastation of her homeworld was too fresh, her people too few to risk further losses. She nodded slowly. "We will cooperate." The other delegates, one by one, reluctantly agreed. "Good," Graves said. "Our scouts have already begun analyzing Krillax movements. Their main fleet is converging on the edge of your territories, near the Venthri system. That's where we'll strike first." "But the Venthri are gone," protested the Grivaxan representative. "It's a graveyard." Graves's eyes narrowed, "which makes it the perfect battlefield. Trust me, humanity knows how to turn the tide of a fight." Hours later, the human fleet arrived at the Venthri system. The Krillax had already begun consuming the shattered remains of the Venthri homeworld, their vast hive ships looming like predators over a kill. Commander Graves stood on the bridge of her flagship, resolute, watching the enemy through the panoramic viewport. Her officers worked silently, their focus absolute. "Status report," she ordered. "Enemy forces, 112 vessels, including 3 Hive-class ships," replied her tactical officer. "Our fleet is outnumbered 2-1. Graves smirked. Perfect odds. The Krillax noticed the fleet's arrival and began to shift, their formations tightening. They moved with a disturbing unity, their ships acting as one. Graves turned to her communications officer. "Broadcast on all frequencies." A moment later, her voice echoed across the system, cold and unwavering. "This is Commander Elena Graves of Earth. To the Krillax, you've made a grave mistake. You should have stayed away from our galaxy." There was no response, only the silent movement of the Krillax fleet as they prepared to attack. "Typical," Graves muttered. "Initiate Phase 1. The human fleet began their assault with a precision the Galactic Council had never seen. Ships darted through enemy lines, evading fire with an elegance that seemed almost impossible. "Deploy the disruptors," Graves commanded. Spherical devices launched from the human ships, glowing faintly as they activated. Moments later, waves of energy rippled through the Krillax forces, disrupting their coordination. Ships veered off course, colliding with one another. The alien observers, watching from a safe distance, gasped in amazement. "They've severed the hive's neural link," exclaimed the Zenthari ambassador. "How did they do that?" "Human ingenuity," the Lorithian elder replied, his voice filled with newfound respect. As the Krillax scrambled to regroup, humanity's fleet pressed their advantage. Missiles tore through enemy ships, and precision laser strikes reduced Hive-class vessels to smoldering wreckage. On the bridge of the Resolute, Graves watched the battle unfold. "Hold the line," she ordered. "We're not done yet." The battle raged for hours, but by the end, the Krillax forces lay in ruins. Humanity had achieved what the Council thought impossible. They had turned the tide. As the last Krillax ship detonated, a cheer erupted across the human fleet. On the Council's observation deck, the delegates stared in stunned silence. They actually did it," whispered the Zenthari ambassador. Graves appeared on their display once more. "That was just the beginning," she said. "Prepare your fleets. The Krillax aren't finished, and neither are we." For the first time, hope began to replace despair. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity's unorthodox tactics. The victory at the Venthri system sent ripples through the Galactic Council. Delegates who had doubted humanity's capabilities now watched with a mix of awe and unease. How had these so-called primitives defeated an enemy that had decimated the most advanced fleets in the galaxy? Commander Elena Graves stood at the heart of the Council's war room, a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy projected before her. Around her, alien leaders listened intently as she outlined her next move. "The Krillax aren't just a military threat," Graves began, her voice sharp and focused. "They're a swarm. They evolve, adapt, and overwhelm. To win this war, we can't just fight them head-on. We need to outthink them." The Grivaxan representative leaned forward, his skepticism evident. "Outthink them. They destroyed our fleets, Commander. What exactly do you propose that we haven't already tried? Graves's lips curled into a faint smile. Something you wouldn't dare. We're going to bait them into a trap. Hours later, the human fleet began preparing for their bold maneuver. At the heart of their plan was a seemingly bizarre strategy, deploying decoy ships designed to mimic the energy signatures of their most powerful vessels. "Are you sure this will work?" asked Captain Riatoris, one of Graves's closest advisors. Graves nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Krillax rely on overwhelming their enemies through sheer numbers. They'll chase what they think is an easy kill. That's when we'll strike. The decoys were launched, spreading across the Krillax's known invasion paths. From a distance, they appeared to be genuine human warships, brimming with energy and advanced weaponry. Meanwhile, the Krillax hive mind detected the new threat. To them, the decoys were a tantalizing prize, a cluster of ships ripe for destruction. Without hesitation, they diverted a significant portion of their fleet to intercept. On board the Resolute, Graves watched as the Krillax fell into the trap. Her tactical officer grinned. "They've taken the bait. Their fleet is splitting up, just as you predicted." Graves leaned forward. "Good. Activate the interdiction fields." From hidden positions, human ships deployed specialized devices that created gravitational disruptions, preventing the Krillax from retreating into hyperspace. The trap had been sprung. The battle that followed was nothing short of a spectacle. Humanity's forces struck from multiple angles, using tactics the Krillax had never encountered. Graves had instructed her fleet to focus on adaptability. Unlike the rigid formations of other species, human ships moved unpredictably, executing daring maneuvers that left the Krillax confused and vulnerable. At one point, a human frigate performed what the Zenthari ambassador later described as an act of suicidal insanity. The ship accelerated directly into a Krillax hive vessel, ejecting its crew moments before impact. Upon collision, the frigate detonated, taking the massive enemy ship with it. The Zenthari ambassador, observing the battle from a secure outpost, shook her head in disbelief. "These humans, they are fearless. They are unpredictable," added the Lorithian elder. "And that makes them dangerous." By the time the battle ended, the Krillax fleet was in disarray. Humanity's unconventional tactics had turned the tide once again, leaving the swarm scrambling to regroup. On the bridge of the Resolute, Commander Graves received reports of their success, yet her expression remained stern. "Don't celebrate yet," she warned her crew. "This was just one battle. The Krillax will adapt, just as we knew they would. We need to stay ahead of them." In the aftermath of the victory, the Galactic Council convened to discuss the next steps. For the first time, the room was filled with a cautious sense of hope. Graves addressed the delegates with a confidence that demanded respect. "If we're going to win this war, you'll need to trust us. Humanity doesn't play by the same rules as the Krillax, or anyone else, and that's our greatest strength." The Zenthari ambassador hesitated before speaking. "Your methods are unorthodox, but they work. What do you propose next?" Graves's eyes gleamed. "We take the fight to them. No more running, no more defending. It's time to show the Krillax what happens when you push humanity too far." The room fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. The Lorithian elder finally spoke, his voice filled with resolve. "You have our support, Commander. Lead the way." Graves nodded. "Then prepare your fleets. This is just the beginning." Humanity's bold offensive. The Krillax hive mind reeled from its recent defeats. Its once unstoppable advance had been brought to a standstill, not by sheer firepower, but by a species it had grossly underestimated. Now, the humans were on the move, and they were bringing the fight to the swarm. On board the flagship Resolute, Commander Elena Graves studied the holographic map of Krillax-controlled space. Glowing red spheres marked hive clusters, territories the swarm had consumed. "Here," she said, pointing to a cluster near the Duranth Nebula. "The Krillax have been using this system as a staging ground for their attacks. If we can disrupt their operations there, we'll cripple their supply lines." Captain Riatoris frowned. "That's deep in their territory. They'll see us coming." Graves's expression hardened. "Good. Let them. It's time they realized we're not afraid of them." The Galactic Council was less enthusiastic. The idea of launching an offensive into Krillax space seemed suicidal. "You're proposing we send our remaining fleets into enemy territory," the Grivaxen representative exclaimed. "If this fails, we'll be defenseless." Graves met his gaze, her voice calm but firm. "If we sit back and wait, the Krillax will pick us apart anyway. The only way to win is to take the initiative." The Zenthari ambassador leaned forward, her golden eyes sharp. "And what makes you think this plan will work?" Graves's lips curved into a faint smile. Because humanity thrives under pressure. We don't just survive, we adapt. And the Krillax haven't seen what we're truly capable of. After a tense silence, the council reluctantly agreed. The offensive was approved, but the alien leaders made one thing clear: failure was not an option. The journey into Krillax space was fraught with danger. The fleet navigated through uncharted territories, dodging patrols and avoiding detection. Each passing day brought new challenges, but the humans faced them with determination. Commander, Torres reported one evening, "We've detected a Krillax recon unit ahead. They'll spot us in minutes." Graves didn't hesitate. Engage cloak protocols. Prepare EMP disruptors. Moments later, the fleet disappeared from enemy scanners. When the Krillax recon ships approached, they were met with a sudden wave of electromagnetic pulses. Their systems shorted out, leaving them adrift in the void. "Move quickly," Graves ordered. "We can't risk reinforcements." By the time the fleet reached the Duranth Nebula, the Krillax had begun to suspect an intrusion. Their forces in the region mobilized, creating a defensive perimeter around the Hive cluster. Graves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet displayed before her. The Krillax outnumbered them 3-1. "Status report," she demanded. Torres replied, "Enemy fleet consists of 200 vessels, including 5 Hive-class ships. They're expecting us." Graves smirked. "Let them. Deploy the Valkyries." At her command, a squadron of sleek, unmanned drones launched from the human ships. Equipped with experimental AI and cutting-edge weaponry, the drones darted into enemy lines, weaving between Krillax ships with near-impossible agility. The Krillax fired wildly, unable to predict the drones' movements. Explosions rippled through their formations as the Valkyries delivered precision strikes to critical systems. "That's just the appetizer," Graves muttered. "Begin Phase 2. While the drones distracted the Krillax fleet, humanity's main force moved into position. Using the nebula's dense clouds as cover, they launched surprise attacks from multiple angles. The Krillax, used to overwhelming their enemies with brute force, struggled to counter the humans' unorthodox tactics. Ships collided in the chaos, and Hive-class vessels were crippled by surgical strikes. On the Council's observation deck, the alien delegates watched in stunned silence. "They're dismantling the Krillax fleet piece by piece," the Xanthari ambassador whispered. "It's brilliant." The Grivaxan representative, who had been one of Graves's harshest critics, nodded slowly. "Perhaps we've underestimated them." As the battle raged, Graves issued the final command. "Target the Hive cluster," she said. "Take out their staging ground." A volley of missiles and energy beams rained down on the Krillax base, reducing it to rubble. The swarm's reinforcements faltered, their coordination unraveling without the Hive's command. The Krillax fleet began to retreat, their forces scattering into disarray. Humanity had achieved the unthinkable. They had taken the fight to the enemy and emerged victorious. In the aftermath, the fleet regrouped to assess their losses. While the victory was decisive, it had come at a cost. Several human ships had been destroyed, their crews lost in the line of duty. Graves addressed her officers with solemn pride. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of. But this war isn't over. The Krillax will regroup, and so will we." This was just one battle in a much larger fight. The officers saluted, their resolve unwavering. The Krillax's counterattack. The destruction of the Hive cluster at the Duranth Nebula was a victory for humanity and their allies, but everyone knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The Krillax, with their relentless hive mind, would not take this defeat lightly. Deep in the cold reaches of space, the swarm was already adapting, preparing to strike back harder than ever. On board the Resolute, Commander Elena Graves studied the latest intelligence reports. Krillax activity had spiked across multiple systems, their ships moving in calculated patterns that suggested a coordinated assault. "They're regrouping," said Captain Ria Torres, standing beside her. "If they launch a full-scale counterattack, we won't have the numbers to stop them." Graves nodded, her expression grim. "They're angry. We've disrupted their plans, and now they're coming for us. But anger makes them predictable. We can use that." "How?" Torres asked, skeptical. Graves's lips curved into a thin smile. "By being just as unpredictable as before, only bigger." The Krillax's counterattack began with devastating precision. Swarms of ships descended on allied worlds, their forces overwhelming planetary defenses in mere hours. Refugees flooded Council space, bringing tales of destruction and despair. In the Galactic Council chambers, panic rippled through the delegates. "We're losing entire systems," the Grivaxan representative shouted. "We must recall all fleets to defend our core worlds." and let the outer colonies burn. The Xanthari ambassador snapped. If we abandon them, we'll lose their trust and their resources. Commander Graves stood at the center of the chaos, her voice cutting through the clamor. Enough. We can't win this war by running. We have to make a stand. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Graves continued, her tone calm but commanding. The Krillax think we're scattered and afraid. They believe they can pick us off one by one. But if we unite, if we strike back as one force, we can stop them in their tracks. The Lorithian elder frowned. And where do you propose we make this stand, Commander? Graves pointed to a system on the holographic map. Here. The Peldrin Nexus. It's a strategic choke point. If we hold it, we can cut off the Krillax's advance and buy ourselves time to regroup. The battle for the Peldrin Nexus was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity and their allies pooled their resources, assembling a massive fleet to confront the Krillax head-on. On the bridge of the Resolute, Graves watched as the enemy ships emerged from hyperspace. The Krillax fleet was vast, stretching across the void like a black tide. Enemy numbers exceed projections, Torres reported, her voice tense. We're outnumbered 5-1. Graves's gaze didn't waver. Numbers don't win battles. Strategy does. Signal the fleet to hold position. As the Krillax closed in, the Allied fleet appeared to hesitate, their ships forming a loose defensive line. To the Krillax, it looked like disarray, a vulnerable force ripe for annihilation. But Graves had planned for this. Hidden among the asteroid fields surrounding the Nexus were dozens of human stealth ships, armed with experimental weaponry. Wait for my signal, Graves ordered, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Krillax surged forward, their ships tearing through the outer defenses. Just as they reached the heart of the Allied fleet, Graves gave the command. Now, the stealth ships decloaked, unleashing a devastating barrage of high-energy blasts. The Krillax vanguard was obliterated in seconds, their formation thrown into chaos. All units, counterattack, Graves shouted. The Allied fleet surged forward, their ships coordinating with precision. Human pilots executed daring maneuvers, weaving through Krillax lines and targeting critical systems. Despite the initial success, the Krillax adapted quickly. Their ships began to swarm the Allied fleet, using sheer numbers to overwhelm their defenses. On board the Resolute, alarms blared as enemy fire hammered the ship's shields. Shields at 30%. Torres called out. We can't take much more of this. Graves clenched her fists, her mind racing. She needed a way to turn the tide. Fast. Divert power from non-essential systems to the weapons array, she ordered. We're not going down without a fight. The Resolute unleashed a barrage of plasma cannons, carving a path through the Krillax swarm. Other ships followed suit, rallying around the flagship in a desperate push. Just when it seemed the battle might be lost, reinforcements arrived. A fleet of Xanthari dreadnoughts and Lorithian cruisers emerged from hyperspace, their weapons blazing. The Krillax, caught between two forces, began to falter. One by one, their ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. Hours later, the battle was over. The Allied fleet had held the line, but the cost had been high. Dozens of ships lay in ruins, their crews lost. In the aftermath, Graves addressed the fleet. We've proven that we can stand against the Krillax, even when the odds are against us. But this war is far from over. They'll come back, stronger and smarter than before, and when they do, we'll be ready. Her words echoed across the comms, a rallying cry for the survivors. The Krillax's deadliest weapon. The Krillax swarm had never been known to retreat, but after the devastating loss at the Peldrin Nexus, their forces pulled back into the shadows of the galaxy. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like a victory. But Commander Elena Graves knew better. This isn't a retreat, she said, standing in the dimly lit war room aboard the Resolute. Holographic projections of Krillax-controlled space flickered before her. It's a regroup. They're planning something bigger. Torres, seated at the tactical console, glanced up. Bigger. They've already thrown their entire fleet at us. What more can they do? Graves tapped the display, zooming in on a star system at the edge of Krillax space. Intelligence reports suggest strange energy signatures emanating from this region. Whatever it is, the Krillax are pouring resources into it. I don't like it. The Xanthari ambassador's holographic image flickered to life. Commander Graves, are you suggesting the swarm is developing new technology? Graves's expression was grim. I'm suggesting they're building something that could end this war, and not in our favor. The Council reluctantly approved a reconnaissance mission to investigate the energy signatures. Graves knew the risks. The Krillax would be guarding their secret with everything they had. But humanity thrived on risk. The Resolute and a small task force entered Krillax space, under the cover of advanced cloaking technology. The journey was tense, every sensor ping raising the possibility of discovery. As they approached the target system, the energy readings spiked dramatically. "Graves, you need to see this," Torres called out, her voice uneasy. The main view screen lit up, revealing a massive structure suspended in orbit around a dying star. The Krillax hive mind had constructed what could only be described as a fortress, its jagged organic design pulsing with unnatural energy. "What in the galaxy is that?" Torres muttered. Graves stared at the monstrosity, a sinking feeling in her gut. "It's a weapon, and it's not just meant to destroy fleets. It's targeting planets." The Krillax fortress was surrounded by swarms of ships, their movements erratic but purposeful. It was clear they were guarding something critical. "Scans are picking up a power core deep inside the structure," Torres reported. "If we can disable it, we might be able to shut the whole thing down." Graves frowned. "And if we don't?" Torres hesitated. "If they fire that thing, it could wipe out entire star systems." The weight of the revelation settled over the bridge. There was no time to wait for reinforcements. If the Krillax activated their weapon, billions would die. Graves called for a daring plan. The Resolute and its task force would infiltrate the Krillax defenses, using the chaos of a diversionary attack to slip past the swarm. A specialized strike team would board the fortress, sabotage the power core, and escape before the weapon could be fired. "It's suicide," Torres said bluntly. Graves nodded. "But it's our only chance." The operation began with a coordinated assault on the Krillax's outer defenses. Human and allied ships darted through the swarm, drawing enemy fire away from the Resolute. Inside the ship, the strike team prepared for their mission. Clad in reinforced armor and armed with advanced weaponry, they moved with quiet determination. "Remember," Graves said over the comms, "you're not just fighting for your lives. You're fighting for everyone back home. Make it count." The team's leader, Sergeant Malik Voss, gave a sharp salute. "We'll get it done, Commander." The Resolute punched through the Krillax defenses, delivering the strike team to the fortress's surface. The boarding craft latched onto the structure, and the team breached its hull. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The walls pulsed like living flesh, and an unnatural hum filled the air. "Keep moving," Voss ordered, his voice steady. "We've got a job to do." The team encountered heavy resistance as they made their way to the power core. Krillax drones swarmed them, their jagged limbs slashing and tearing. "Cover me," shouted Private Lin, laying down suppressive fire as the others advanced. When the team reached the core, they were met with a horrifying sight. The heart of the weapon wasn't mechanical, it was biological. A pulsating mass of Krillax tissue, glowing with raw energy, was encased in a crystalline shell. "It's alive," Voss muttered. "And it's powering the entire fortress," Lin added, her voice tinged with fear. The team planted charges around the core, setting a timer for detonation. But as they prepared to retreat, the Krillax hive mind responded. The fortress trembled, its walls shifting and closing in. "They know we're here," Voss shouted. "Move, now." Back on the Resolute, Graves monitored the mission with bated breath. "Strike team, status report," she demanded. "We've planted the charges," Voss replied, his voice strained. "But the Krillax are locking down the structure. We need an exit." Graves turned to Torres. "Get them out of there." The Resolute maneuvered dangerously close to the fortress, deploying a retrieval craft to extract the strike team. The fortress erupted in a blinding explosion as the charges detonated, sending shockwaves rippling through space. The Krillax weapon was destroyed, but the cost had been steep. Voss's voice crackled over the comms. "Strike team aboard. We're clear." Relief flooded the bridge, but Graves knew this was only a temporary victory. "They'll build another one," she said quietly. "And next time, it'll be even worse. Humanity's final gambit." The galaxy held its breath as news of the Krillax fortress's destruction spread. For a brief moment, there was hope that the tide had finally turned. But Commander Elena Graves knew the truth. The Krillax swarm would return, angrier and more relentless than ever. In the dimly lit war room aboard the Resolute, the Allied leaders debated their next move. "We've struck a significant blow," the Zenthari ambassador said, his blue eyes glinting with pride. "Surely they'll think twice before launching another attack." "They don't think the way we do," Graves countered, her tone sharp. "They don't retreat out of fear. They adapt. If we don't act now, they'll overwhelm us with a weapon even more devastating." The room fell silent. The Krillax hive mind had been evolving for millennia, and humanity's victory at the fortress was little more than a ripple in their grand design. Graves leaned forward, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. We need to take the fight to them, hit their central hive. End this war before it destroys us all. The suggestion sent a wave of unease through the council. The central hive. The Dravonian representative exclaimed, his golden scales shimmering in the artificial light. No one has ever dared to approach it. It's suicide. Maybe, Graves replied. But it's our best chance. If we don't destroy their command structure, they'll never stop. Humanity has survived on impossible odds before. This is no different. Her words resonated with the human delegation, and after a heated debate, the council reluctantly approved the plan. The Krillax Central Hive was located in the heart of the Pervidian Nebula, a swirling expanse of gas and debris that disoriented sensors and crippled navigation. The journey alone would be a challenge. But for humanity, challenges were simply opportunities in disguise. Graves assembled a coalition of humanity's finest minds and warriors. The fleet included experimental ships designed specifically for this mission. Sleek, heavily armored, and bristling with advanced weaponry. Among them was the Resolute, leading the charge. Prepare for the worst, Graves told her crew during the final briefing. But fight like this is our finest hour. Because it is. As the fleet approached the nebula, the Krillax swarm was waiting. Thousands of ships filled the void, forming an impenetrable barrier around the hive. They were expecting us, Torres said grimly, scanning the endless array of enemy vessels. Good, Graves replied. Let them know we're coming. The Allied fleet surged forward, breaking into smaller formations to divide the Krillax forces. Explosions lit up the nebula as ships clashed, their weapons cutting through the chaos. Inside the Resolute, the tension was palpable. Graves kept her focus on the central hive, its massive silhouette barely visible through the swirling gases. The Krillax hive was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was alive, its organic structure pulsing with an eerie light, tendrils extending into space like the arms of a predator. As the Resolute drew closer, the hive reacted, releasing waves of bioorganic fighters. Target the tendrils, Graves ordered. We cut off their defenses first. The fleet's weapons systems roared to life, tearing through the hive's outer layers. But the Krillax fought back with a ferocity unmatched by any previous battle. The Resolute pressed forward, carving a path through the chaos. On board, a specialized strike team prepared for the final assault. Among them was Sergeant Malik Voss, who had barely survived the fortress mission. This is it, Voss said to his team. No second chances. We take out the hive mind, or we don't come back at all. The team launched in a heavily armed shuttle, navigating through the hive's defenses. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. The walls were alive, throbbing with energy as the hive mind fought to repel the intruders. Stay focused, Voss barked, leading his team deeper into the hive. At the heart of the hive, they found it. The Krillax core, a massive, pulsating brain encased in a crystalline structure, surrounded by swarms of drones. This is it, Voss said, planting the charges. Once this goes, they all go. But as the team worked, the hive responded. Tendrils erupted from the walls, dragging soldiers into the darkness. Cover me, Voss shouted, firing wildly as the drones closed in. Back on the Resolute, Graves watched the mission unfold through a live feed. Her heart pounded as the strike team fought desperately to complete their task. Come on, she muttered under her breath. The charges were set, but the team was pinned down. With time running out, Voss made a decision. You go, he told his team. I'll stay and finish this. No, Lynn protested. We all make it out. Voss shook his head. This is bigger than us. Go, that's an order. The shuttle escaped just as the charges detonated, sending a shockwave through the hive. The Krillax ships faltered, their movements chaotic and uncoordinated. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew erupted in cheers as the hive disintegrated. Graves allowed herself a moment of relief, but it was bittersweet. Voss and his team's sacrifice would never be forgotten. The Krillax swarm was broken, their hive mind shattered. For the first time in decades, the galaxy was free from their relentless assault. Graves stood before the Allied Council, her voice steady. We did what we had to do. Humanity answered the call. And we'll be ready if they ever come back. The galaxy had been saved, not by advanced technology or overwhelming firepower, but by humanity's courage, determination, and willingness to fight for a future worth living for.